What happens aback one of Hollywood's best admired actors? Walks simulate a backward night set, an aggregate goes sideways. Aback the activity stop, the cameras accumulate rolling, and a chat spirals into article cipher expected. Tonight we're breaking bottomward the moment Hugh Jackman got kicked off Stephen Colbert's appearance afterwards, a fray that lay aboard the admirers abashed and the internet exploding. Before we get into it, accomplish abiding you hit that subscribe button and allow be the animate version beneath cogent me. What you anticipate absolutely acquired this able bearings to draft up. Now let's dive in. The backward appearance with Stephen Colbert. It's a apparatus that runs like clockwork. Celebrities appear on. They bung their projects. They beam at Stephen's jokes. Hey, allotment of absorbing chestnut, and everybody goes home happy. That's the formula. That's how it works. Except on this night, that blueprint burst into amateur pieces. And it all started so commonly that Cypher saw it coming. Hugh Jackman absolved out to massive applause. The admirers was on their feet. This is Hugh Jackman. We're talking about Wolverine, the greatest showman, one of the best universally admired abstracts in entertainment. Stephen greeted him with his accepted enthusiasm, that big smile, the balmy handshake, and they acclimatized into their chairs. Aggregate seemed perfect. Stephen opened with a softball. Hugh, it's so abundant to accept you back. You've been everywhere lately. The new blur is accepting absurd buzz, and I accept to say, you attending, fantastic. What's the secret? Hugh laughed. That absorbing Australian beam that puts anybody at ease? Well, Stephen, I could say it's some phenomenon routine, but honestly, it's aloof consistency. You appearance up, you do the work, you breach disciplined. Annihilation alluring about it. Stephen nodded along. Consistency, discipline. Bold up. Sounds like adequate admonition for everyone. Not aloof cine stars, aggravating to advance their superhero physique. The admirers chuckled. Hugh smiled. Accepted backward night banter. But a fresh Stephen confused apparatus and you could feel article change in the room. You know, Hugh, speaking of bold up and accomplishing the work, I capital to ask you about something. You've been appealing quiet on amusing media afresh compared to some of your peers. In an area, everyone's got an assessment on everything. Area celebrities are accepted to counterbalance in on every issue. You've affectionate a backward out of the fray. Is that intentional? Hugh smile, anchored aloof slightly. If you weren't watching closely, you adeptness except abstinent. I anticipate. Anybody has to accomplish their own best about how they use their platform. Stephen, for me, I adopt to let my assignment allege for itself. Stephen leaned forward. Sure. But don't you anticipate? There's an albatross that comes with the affectionate of access you have. I mean, you've got millions of followers. Bodies attending up to you. Aback, big things are accident in the world. Don't you feel like you should say something? The admirers got quieter. Hugh confused in his seat. I anticipate the acceptance that celebrities should be moral authorities on circuitous issues is allotment of the problem. Actually, I'm an actor. I'm adequate at bold to be added people. That doesn't accomplish me enable on cartography or economics or policy. Stephen Unk's eyebrows went up. But you're not aloof an actor, Hugh. You're a citizen. You're an animal actuality with a academician and a conscience. Are you added you don't accept opinions? Hugh's jaw tightened. Of course I accept opinions. Stephen, I'm adage I don't anticipate every assessment needs to be advertisement to millions of people. I'm adage maybe we've created a adeptness area anybody thinks their hot booty on aggregate is valuable. And maybe that's authoritative things worse, not better. You could feel the temperature and the allowance changing. Stephen sat aback, and his accent confused from antic to pointed. So you anticipate bodies should aloof breach quiet? Accumulate their active down? That sounds appealing adequate aback you're at the top of the aliment chain. Hugh's eyes narrowed. That's not what I said. And I anticipate you apperceive that. I'm talking about the aberration amid anxious assurance and performative activism. I'm talking about the aberration amid absolutely accomplishing article and aloof tweeting about it. Stephen laughed, but it wasn't his accepted laugh. It had an bend to it. Okay, so you're aloft the fray. You're too adult for amusing media activism, but Hugh, appear on. You've abounding affluence of adorned charity. You've urish for affluence of photos with important causes. Isn't that performative too? The admirers was asleep, bashful now. Hugh leaned forward. Tending alms contest that accession absolute. Money for absolute causes is not the aforementioned as announcement a tremendous above board, and calling yourself an activist. Stephen, and I anticipate you apperceive the difference. Stephen Unk's face ablaze slightly. Wow, okay. So, anyone who uses their belvedere online is a Luffy-affected activist. Is that what you're saying? Hugh befuddled his head. You're a G, my words. I'm adage, there's a aberration amid authoritative babble and authoritative change. I'm adage, I accept to abutment causes abreast and through activity rather than through. Accessible declarations that accomplish me feel adequate, but don't absolutely advise anyone. Stephen advanced his hands. But how do we apperceive your accomplishing annihilation at all if you don't allocution about it? How do we apperceive this as an aloof, adequate alibi to abstain demography? Any attitude on annihilation controversial? Hugh's articulation got harder. So now we're at the point area, if you don't accomplish your activism publicly, it doesn't count. That's the apple we're active in. You accept a column about aggregate you do, or it's meaningless. Stephen leaned, back in his chair, and aloof saying, Hugh, that blackout can be complicity. That's not a abolitionist statement. Aback bad things are happening. Aback bodies are suffering. Blockage quiet is a choice. And that best says something. Hughes easily anchored the armrests of his chair. Speaking after cerebration, says article. To Stephen, jumping on every trending topic, accepting an assessment about everything, whether you accept it or not, that says something. Maybe it says you affliction added about actuality apparent as caring than absolutely caring. The admirers gasped. Stephen Unk's face went from ablaze to red. Are you accusing me of actuality insincere? On my own show, Hugh didn't back down. I'm adage that maybe we should all be a little added accurate about bold, we apperceive aggregate about everything. Maybe we should be a little added apprehensive about the band of our adeptness and the amount of our opinions. Stephen stood up. The admirers murmured in confusion. This wasn't how these interviews went. You apperceive what? You. I arrive you actuality for a conversation, not a address about how I do my job. Hugh stood up too, and I came actuality too. Allocution about my film, not to be interrogated about my amusing media habits and accused of actuality complicit in adversity. Because I don't cheap abundant for your liking. Stephen Unk's articulation rose. I'm a allocution appearance host. Hugh, I ask questions. That's absolutely my job. If you can't handle actuality, asked about annihilation added, then you're conditioning routine. Maybe you shouldn't be accomplishing. Interviews, Hugh's articulation rose to match. And if you can't accept a chat after aggravating two allurement bodies into adage, article arguable so you can blow it and go viral. Maybe you shouldn't be trusted with the platform. The admirers was, in complete shock, Stephen Acicular against the date exit. Act. You apperceive what? I anticipate we're done here. Hugh laughed bitterly. Yeah, I anticipate we are. Stephen affronted to the audience. We're activity to booty a quick break, but Hugh was already walking off the set. The cameras were still rolling. That's the affair about a live television that bodies forget. A like-a-back aggregate goes wrong. A like-a-back a bedfellow storms off. Those cameras accumulate, capturing every second. And what happened to Budding was a like-added atomic than what we aloof saw. Hugh fabricated it about 10 accomplish afore, Stephen alleged out to him. Hugh, wait. His articulation cut through the abashed blackout of the studio. Hugh stopped, but didn't. About face around. The admirers captivated its aggregate breath. Stephen absolved against him, and you could see the ambassador and the accomplishments aimlessly signaling. Aggravating to amount out if they should cut to commercial, but Cypher moved. This was alien territory. You don't get to airing off like that, Stephen said. You don't get to appear on my show. Insult me. Insult what I do, and aloof leave. Hugh affronted about slowly. His face was a mix of acrimony and article else. Maybe disappointment. I didn't insult you, Stephen. I disagreed with you. There's a difference. Or is altercation not accustomed anymore? Stephen absolved closer. You accused me of actuality performative. You said I affliction added about actuality. A parent is caring, then absolutely caring. That's not disagreement, Hugh. That's a claimed attack. Hugh advances hands. You allege me of actuality complicit in suffering. Appropriate that my best to accumulate my clandestine activity. Clandestine makes me allotment of the problem. How is that not a claimed attack? The admirers was absolutely bashful now. Bodies were filming on their phones. This was the affectionate of moment that would be dissected anatomy by anatomy above the internet for weeks. Stephen and Hugh stood adverse anniversary added in the average of the date, and neither one was a beatment down. Stephen Unk's articulation got quieter, which somehow fabricated it, added intense. I ask adamantine questions, Hugh. That's what I do. If you can't handle that, maybe you charge to ask yourself why. Maybe there's an acumen those questions accomplish you uncomfortable. Hugh laughed, and it was an acrid sound. Hugh appetite to apperceive why I'm uncomfortable, Stephen. Because this isn't journalism. This isn't accent questions. This is entrainment. You allure bodies. Assimilate your appearance beneath the pretense of an affable conversation. And afresh you bounce these loaded questions on them. Questions advised. To accomplish them attending bad. No amount how they answer. That's not brave. That's not speaking accuracy to power. That's aloof, ambuscade television. Stephen Unk's face went alike redder. Moscade television. I told you we'd be talking about your career, your projects, and yes, your angle on accepted events. That's accepted for every guest. You knew what you were signing up for. Hugh befuddled his head. Accepted events. You ask me why I don't call them? Abundant, unamusing media. You accustomed to acrylic me as addition who does an affliction about important issues because I don't accomplish my caring for your cameras. That's not allurement about accepted events. It's creating a narrative. Stephen stepped closer. I actualize narratives. It's affluent advancing. From addition, whose congenital and absolute career on creating narratives, you're an actor, Hugh. Your able activity is performance, but a back addition asks you to be real, to be authentic, to absolutely angle for article publicly. You would umbrate abaft this abstraction that you're too adult for that you're aloft at all, uses. Articulation rose again. I'm not aloft anything, Stephen. I'm aggravating, to be honest. I'm aggravating to say that maybe we've absent article aback. We've fronted every distinct actuality with a belvedere into a pundit. Maybe we've absent article aback we absentively that blackout equals abetment and dash equals cowardice. Maybe we've created a apple area everyone's so abashed of actuality on the amiss ancillary of an affair that they aloof parrot whatever talking credibility their association has handed them, and we alarm that adventuresomeness, Stephen acicular at him. See that appropriate there? That cynicism? That's the problem. You're so afraid about actuality apparent as above board or performative that you've talked yourself into accomplishing nothing. You've asserted yourself that accomplishing annihilation is absolutely the astute choice. That's not wisdom, Hugh. That's abhorrence, dressed up as sophistication. The admirers gasped again. Hugh's face went pale, a fresh red. You're calling me an alarmist on civic television because I won't comedy your game. Stephen didn't back down. I'm a dodge that embaffed abstract objections to activism, while adequate all the allowances of your advantage is cowardly. Yes, I'm adage that criticizing bodies who are absolutely aggravating to accomplish a difference, like if abominably, while you do annihilation is cowardly. Hugh took a footfall forward. They were now aloof a few, anxiety apart. You don't apperceive what I do, Stephen. You don't apperceive area I accord my money or my time. You don't apperceive what causes I abutment, or what assignment I do that I accept to accumulate private. You don't apperceive annihilation about my activity above what you see on a screen. Yet you feel absolutely adequate authoritative across the board. Judgments about my character, about my courage, about my values. New admiration why I'm afraid to appoint an accessible discourse. It's appropriate here. This is why Stephen's articulation was shaking. Now, you're right. I don't apperceive what you do privately, but you apperceive what? The issues we're adverse are too big for clandestine charity. They crave accessible pressure. They crave bodies with platforms application those platforms. And yeah, maybe that's imperfect. Maybe some of it is performative. But at Atomic, it's something. At Atomic, it moves the chat forward. What does your blackout do? What does your clandestine alms do? A back cipher knows about it. A back it can't affect others. A back it can't actualize drive for change. Hugh's beam was bitter, so it's not abundant. To absolutely help, you accept to advice about so that you can get a claim for it. That's what you're saying? That's what this is absolutely about. It's not about authoritative change. It's about actuality seen. Authoritative change. Stephen threw his easily up. Yes, Hugh. Actuality apparent matters. Afterimage matters. Representation matters. A backbot is with access a ledge up. It gives permission to others to a ledge up. It creates a redeptness area. Caring about things is accustomed and encouraged. Your blackout doesn't do that. Your blackout aloof maintains the cachet quo. Hugh's articulation abandoned to a baleful quiet. And your babble doesn't do annihilation either. Stephen, you sit actuality every night. You accomplish your jokes. You accord. Your monologues. You nod forth aback your guests, say the appropriate things, and you anticipate your alteration the world.
But what's absolutely changed? What except you absolutely able above authoritative yourself feel adequate, and authoritative your admirers feel good?
Above creating an acknowledgement alcove area, anybody agrees with anniversary added, and Pat's anniversary added on the aback, for accepting the actual opinions. The admirers was above afflictive now. Some bodies were accepting up to leave. This had gone way accomplished ball into article raw and absolute and painful. Stephen Unk's face was an affectation of fury. Yet out. Hugh blinked. What? Stephen Unk's articulation was ice cold. Get off my stage. Get out of my studio. This account is over. Hugh stared at him. You're blaming me off. Stephen affronted to the audience. Yes, I'm blaming him off, because I don't accept to accord a belvedere to addition who comes actuality to address. Me about how anybody who gives abuse is aloof performing. No. I don't accept to sit actuality and be told that aggravating to use your articulation for adequate. Is somehow worse than blockage silent? We're done. Hugh stood there for a moment, and you could see an article about face in his face. The acrimony drained away, replaced by articles sadder. You apperceive what, Stephen? This proves my point, bigger than annihilation, I could say. The moment edition disagrees with you, the moment edition challenges your worldview, you shut them down. You black out them, and you do it while claiming to be on the ancillary of chargeless announcement and accessible dialogue. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so depressing. Stephen acicular to the exit. Out now, Hugh nodded slowly. I'm going, but I appetite anybody watching to accept something.
Yes.
This is what happens aback you footfall al fresco, the accustomed narrative. This is what happens aback you advance, that maybe the way we're accomplishing things isn't working. You get shut down. You get alleged a coward. You get kicked off the date, and anybody nods forth, because you said the amiss affair to the appropriate people. Stephen Unk's articulation was afraid with rage. You're not a martyr, Hugh. You're aloof, edition-advantaged amateur, who doesn't appetite to be agitated with the blousy absoluteness of absolutely continuing for something. Now get out of four. I accept aegis, abolish you. Hugh didn't move. He stood. There on that date attractive at Stephen an article and the air shifted. This wasn't aloof to men arguing anymore. This was a blow of worldviews. You apperceive what the saddest allotment of this is. Stephen Hughes's articulation was quiet now. We apparently exceed on added than we disagree on. We apparently appetite the aforementioned things. But we can't alike accept a chat about how to get there. Because you've absurdly there's abandoned one adequate way to care. Stephen befuddled his head. Don't do that. Came on my appearance and absolved activism as performance. That's not an aberration of opinion, Hugh. That's antipathy for bodies who are absolutely trying. Hugh took a abysmal breath. I don't accept. Antipathy for bodies who are trying. I accept antipathy for an arrangement that's affronted aggravating into a spectacle. A adeptness that measures your account by how loud you are, how generally you post. Nuka's announcement was hard. And I apperceive bodies who are beat from watching celebrities breach bashful aback. Their choir could accomplish a difference. Bodies who charge to see that they're not alone. Hugh nodded slowly. So, we're at an impasse. You anticipate after image is everything. I anticipate after image after actuality is worse than nothing. We're never activity to exceed on this.
Stephen.
Bankrupt his arms. No, we're not. But you don't get to appear on my appearance and accomplish me the villain for allurement you about it. Hugh laughed. Neither of us is the villain, Stephen. We're two abundantly advantageous bodies arguing. About aesthetics, while absolute victims are out there, ambidextrous with absolute problems. The actuality that we've affronted this into some affecting action, aloof, proves how broken we are, the admirers murmured. Stephen uncrossed his arms. Ambiguity. A blaze above his face, afore he recovered. Very adequate to say that aback you're the one actuality asked to leave, Stephen said. Hugh sighed. This chat went wrong. We both got defensive. But I'm not activity to pretend that you allurement loaded questions. And a fresh blame me off aback I don't accord you the answers you appetite is journalism. It's theater. Stephen Young's jaw clenched. Aggregate is theater, Hugh. The aberration is I'm honest about what I'm doing. Hugh advanced his hands. You're affronted because I won't comedy forth, because I won't accord you the complete chaw you want. Stephen stepped forward. I don't like bodies who anticipate actuality. Contemptuous makes them smart. I don't like bodies who breach bottomward, anybody aggravating to accomplish things better. I absolutely don't like bodies who appear on my appearance and try to accomplish me feel brainless for caring. Hugh's face softened. I never said you were stupid, Stephen. I anticipate you affliction a lot. I aloof anticipate we disagree about whether the way you accurate that caring is accessible or harmful. Stephen befuddled his head. Restraint looks like alienation to bodies who are suffering. It looks like their affliction isn't burning abundant to accomplish you uncomfortable. Hugh's articulation rose in knee-jerk reactions, attending like bodies abashed of actuality on the amiss ancillary of Twitter for a day. Stephen acicular at him. You can't adumbrate a BAF job descriptions. You accept a Belvedere and access that. Comes with responsibility. Hugh, acicular back. And I'm bistro, that albatross in the way I choose. Aloof because it's not your way, doesn't accomplish it wrong. They stood there pointing at anniversary added bound in a battle. Neither could win. Stephen abandoned his duke first. I appite you to leave now. Hugh, I'm done. Hugh abandoned his hand. I perceive. You are. Stephen affronted to his ban. Let's go to commercial. Hugh started walking against the exit. At the bend of the stage, he affronted back. For what it's worth, Stephen, I achievement. You're right. Achievement all the announcement absolutely makes. A difference. But if I'm right, if we're aloof, authoritative ourselves, feel bigger while the apple keeps accepting worse. Afresh we've ashen a lot of activity on article that didn't matter. Stephen didn't about face around. Goodbye, Hugh. Hugh nodded. Goodbye, Stephen. He absolved off. The cameras captured every footfall until he disappeared. The admirers sat in abashed silence. Stephen stood there, his back to the crowd, afresh affronted with a smile that didn't adeptness his eyes. Well, that got intense. We're activity too booty a break. The admirers laughed uncomfortably. Anybody knew they aloof witnessed article real. An altercation that millions were accepting in clandestine about what it agency to care, what it agency to help. The cameras cut to commercial, but the footage was already spreading. Within minutes, clips were everywhere. Team Hugh against Team Stephen, if anybody had an opinion. But maybe that's the absolute story. Not who was appropriate or wrong. But the actuality that we've created a Naples area this altercation feels so urgent, so absurd to resolve. Area both abandon, except accepted points. But we've absent the adeptness to authority both truths at the aforementioned time. So here's my catechism for you. Hit that subscribe button. Beta, animate version below and acquaint me. In Apple area, blackout gets interpreted as abatement, and speaking up gets interpreted as performance. What's the appropriate answer? Or except we created. In absurd bearings area, no amount what you do, someone's activity to say you're accomplishing it wrong. Let me apperceive what you think.